I was already sitting at the dinner table when it happened. She walked in wearing that red dress. Not just any red dress, that one, the one from our anniversary trip to Napa, the one I bought her when we were still in that early phase where everything was exciting, before the silence started crawling between us like ivy. She hadn't worn that dress in over 2 years, and I damn well knew she wasn't wearing it for me. Erin never wore red to client dinners. She said it was too much. But that night, she came down the stairs like a woman on her way to wreck something, heels clicking slow and deliberate on the hardwood, hair done in loose waves like she was trying to look effortless but spent an hour in the mirror. She didn't even glance at me when she reached for her purse, just checked her lipstick in the hall mirror and said, "Don't wait up. They want to hit a lounge after dinner." No kiss. No casual goodbye. Just that, and the door closing behind her before I could even ask who they were. I sat there for a minute, fork halfway to my mouth, just staring at the empty space she'd left behind. Something about it hit wrong. It wasn't the dress. It was the way she smiled at herself before she left. Not a happy smile. A smug one. Like she had a secret and couldn't wait to savor it later. I didn't touch my food. Instead, I stood, went to the window, and watched her walk to the car. She passed under the porch light, and I saw it clearly, heels I hadn't seen before and a necklace I didn't buy. She paused by the driver's side, looked at her phone, and typed something before getting in. But it wasn't the phone that tipped me off. It was what I saw when she opened the car door. There were no shopping bags, no folders, no laptop, not even her damn work badge. She always brought that junk with her, always juggling something in one hand and her purse in the other. But tonight, just her purse. Like all she needed was lipstick and a lie. So I waited. Not like pacing the floor or checking the clock every 10 minutes. I waited in a different way. I cleaned up the plates, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark like an idiot, letting my thoughts do laps. I knew something was off, but I needed more than a gut feeling. I needed something I could point to, something I could hold. So around 11, I did something I hadn't done in years. I got in my car and drove downtown. Not to follow her. That wasn't the plan. I didn't even know where she was. But I remembered something. 2 weeks earlier, we were at this artsy little wine bar, one of those overpriced places where they pair rose with adjectives like playful, and while she was in the restroom, I'd paid the tab and chatted with the bartender. This kid with thick glasses and an eyebrow piercing. He remembered her. Told me she'd been there the week before with some friends. I didn't think much of it then. But now? That same place was just 5 minutes from the house, and something told me it wasn't client dinners she was spending her late nights on. When I pulled up, the place was still buzzing. Dim lighting, music thumping soft and low like a heartbeat, couples and small groups clustered at tables inside. I didn't get out right away. Just waited, watching the door. I don't know what I expected. Maybe her walking out, maybe nothing at all, but I got something else. About 10 minutes after I parked, the front door swung open, and out walked Erin. She wasn't alone. She was with a man I'd never seen before. Tall, clean-shaven, wearing a blazer like he thought he was better than everyone else. But what got me wasn't his smug walk or his hand lightly touching her back as they stepped onto the sidewalk. It was her. She was laughing. Not just a polite chuckle. A full, head-tilted-back laugh like she was 17 again. Like I didn't exist. I ducked down slightly, not that it mattered. They weren't looking for me. They didn't expect anyone to be watching. They stopped near his car, black BMW, shiny enough to reflect the streetlights, and talked for a while. Close. Too close. I couldn't hear a word, but I didn't need to. Her body language said it all. She touched his chest. He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. They looked like a couple. Not two coworkers after a casual drink. No boundaries. No hesitation. Just ease. Familiarity. She kissed him. Not long. Just a quick one. But enough. More than enough. And just like that, I knew. I didn't go home right away. I drove around for almost an hour, just taking random turns through quiet streets, trying to calm the buzzing in my head. I kept seeing that moment on repeat, her hand on his chest, the laugh, the kiss. It wasn't the physical part that bothered me the most. It was the look on her face. Comfortable. Natural. Like she wasn't doing anything wrong. Like she'd been doing this for a while and didn't feel the need to hide it anymore. And maybe that was the part that hit hardest, that she didn't even flinch when she touched him like that. It meant this wasn't a mistake. It was a routine. By the time I got back, the house was dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked through the living room and sat on the couch in silence, not sure what to do. The cats came over eventually, curled up next to me like they sensed something was off, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I must have sat there for another hour, just staring into the dim outline of the TV screen, trying to figure out how I missed all the signs. But I hadn't missed them. I'd ignored them. I'd written off the distance, the silence, the change in tone every time I asked about her day. I'd told myself people go through phases, that we were just busy, that maybe we'd reconnect after her big project wrapped up. And now here I was, too late for any of that to matter. When she came through the door a little after 1 in the morning, she didn't even realize I was still up. She dropped her purse on the console table, kicked off her shoes, and walked into the kitchen without looking around. I heard the fridge open, the quiet clink of a bottle being pulled out, followed by the hum of the light overhead. She poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter like everything was fine. "You didn't stay out that late when you went out with me," I said, voice low but clear. She jumped slightly and turned to look at me, eyes wide for a second before she recovered. "You scared me," she said, forcing a laugh. "What are you doing sitting in the dark?" "Waiting." She didn't answer right away. She just stood there, holding the glass like it was going to explain something for her. When it didn't, she took a sip and walked over to the edge of the living room, stopping just short of the couch. "Is something wrong?" I looked up at her and shook my head slowly. "No, not anymore. Not now that I know." "Know what? You want to pretend? Or you want to be honest for once?" She looked tired. Not the usual kind of tired. This was different. She sighed and rubbed her forehead like the conversation itself was an inconvenience. "Alex, it was just a drink. We went out with the team. I told you about it. You didn't tell me about him." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't say anything. "The tall guy in the blazer. You kissed him." That got her. Her mouth opened a little, then shut again, like she wanted to say something but didn't know where to start. I waited. I wasn't in the mood to help her find her words. "I don't know what you think you saw." "I saw enough." We stood there in silence, the kind that fills a room up to the ceiling and dares anyone to breathe. She finally sat down across from me, still holding that stupid glass like it was going to give her cover. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is. Tell me why you were out with him in that dress. Tell me why you touched his chest. Why you smiled like that. Tell me why you kissed him. Make it make sense." She stared at the floor for a while before speaking again. "It didn't mean anything, right? Just a little nothing. Just a few nothings, added up over time, and now we're here. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did." "How long?" "A couple months." I nodded, letting that settle in my chest. I don't know why I asked. It didn't change anything. I guess I just wanted to hear it from her. To make it real. She started to say something else, but I stood up. I wasn't ready to hear her excuses. Not yet. I followed a hunch tonight. I didn't check your phone. I didn't go through your stuff. I just paid attention for once, and you made it easy. I didn't want to hurt you. Well, congratulations. You failed. I walked past her toward the hallway, needing space, needing anything that didn't smell like her perfume or sound like her voice. She didn't follow me. Just sat there, still clutching the glass like a prop in a scene she wasn't ready to exit. And that's when I realized this wasn't the beginning of a problem, it was the end of a long one I'd been too blind to see. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I didn't tell anyone either. I just sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee that had gone cold 10 minutes after I poured it, staring at the spot where she sat the night before. I could still see her there in my mind, with that stupid glass in her hand, acting like this was something we could talk through like adults. Like it was a missed appointment or a forgotten anniversary and not her sneaking off with another man behind my back. She came downstairs around 9, already dressed, probably for work, moving quiet like she wasn't sure what version of me she'd find waiting. She looked at the coffee pot, then at me, and for a second, I thought she was going to say something normal, like ask how I slept or if I wanted breakfast. But nothing came out. She just hovered there, uncomfortable, awkward in her own kitchen like she knew she didn't belong in the same room with me anymore. "You look like you slept fine," I said, without looking up. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't answer. She walked over to the fridge, pulled out an energy drink, and leaned against the counter, tapping her nails against the can like she had somewhere better to be, and I realized she probably did. I stood up and pushed the chair back a little harder than I meant to, but I didn't apologize. I walked over and stood across from her, close enough that she had to look up from the floor. "We're going to have a conversation now. Not like last night. This time, you don't get to sit there quiet and hope I let it go." "I didn't say I was hoping anything," she said. "You're hoping this just fades out. That I'll decide it's too much to deal with and either forgive you or leave quietly. But that's not what's happening. You're going to tell me everything, and if you lie once, if I even think you're lying, I swear to you I'll walk into your job and tell every one of your coworkers what kind of person you are. Jesus, Alex. No, not Jesus. Just me. And I'm done playing dumb. She sighed like I was putting her out. Like this was some unreasonable demand and not a consequence of her own choices. She sat thickened down and crossed her arms, which told me she was about to start lying or minimizing, whichever felt easier. Fine. You want the truth. I don't want anything else. I didn't plan this. It wasn't something I set out to do. We started talking after one of the events. Just harmless stuff at first. Jokes. Work stuff. It felt good to talk to someone who wasn't constantly irritated or tired or... I don't know. Just there. I laughed. So I didn't entertain you enough. Got it. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. You needed something else, and instead of talking to me, you decided to find it somewhere else. How long has it been physical? She hesitated. That moment of hesitation was enough. But she answered. Since mid-January. That hit harder than I expected. So while I was taking care of the house, fixing the leaking sink, painting the spare room, doing all the things you said we'd get around to, what? You were faking texts about staying late while you were out screwing some guy you barely knew a year ago? He's not just some guy. I slammed my hand on the counter. Don't you dare say that like it makes it better. You cheating with someone who means something to you is not the defense you think it is. She flinched, but she didn't move. She didn't apologize either. That was what struck me most. She looked like she was annoyed to be in this situation. Not sorry. Not ashamed. Just tired of being caught. You want me to feel something I don't. What do you want, Alex? Do you want me to beg? Cry? I'm not going to do that. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'm also not going to sit here and act like you were some perfect husband and I'm the devil. I stared at her. No one's asking you to say I was perfect. But I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I didn't come home and pretend everything was fine after sleeping with someone else. I kept this damn house running. I showed up. Every day. You were here, but you weren't with me. You checked out a long time ago. Don't turn this around on me. You don't get to cheat and then blame the other person for not stopping you. I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying it didn't come out of nowhere. That's the best you've got? You didn't make me feel special, so I spread my legs for a stranger? Her face went red. You're such an asshole sometimes. Yeah? I'm an asshole. But I didn't betray you. We stood there breathing hard, the distance between us suddenly too small for how far apart we really were. She grabbed her purse and keys without saying another word, walked to the door, and paused only for a second before walking out. And just like that, she left. Again, I didn't say anything to her when she got back that night. I didn't need to. By then, everything I needed to know had already sunk in. She stayed on the opposite side of the house the whole evening like we were distant cousins forced to share a vacation rental. I watched her move around without a trace of guilt, barely glancing my way, and it hit me just how far gone she really was. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't nervous. She was indifferent. That's when the switch flipped. I wasn't going to be the one sitting in this house, waiting for her to feel bad. I wasn't going to ask her to fix anything. I wasn't even going to ask her to leave. I decided I would burn down the entire script she thought she was writing, and I wouldn't lift a finger to warn her. It started simple. That weekend, while she was gone again, probably with him, I boxed up everything that had ever belonged to the version of us I used to care about. Every framed picture, every little vacation souvenir, every anniversary card we'd ever saved, all of it went into 2 big plastic bins. I didn't throw them out. I just stacked them in the garage under the old tarp where she wouldn't look. The space felt cleaner without it. I took down the wedding photos. I deleted the backup folder on the shared drive with all our old videos. I didn't want reminders. I wanted control. She hadn't just cheated on me. She'd rewritten the terms of what we were, and I decided I'd play along, but only if I was the one holding the pin now. The next day, I called a locksmith, had him change the garage code and front door lock, and then I told him it was for a roommate situation, just in case he asked. Erin had a key on her ring, but she'd never once bothered learning the garage code. I changed it to something random, just to make a point. I also replaced the Wi-Fi password. She noticed that first. Hey, did the internet go out? She asked that night, looking up from her laptop. No. I just changed the password. She frowned. Why? Felt like it. You could have told me. You could have told me a lot of things. She didn't reply. Just got up, left the room, and didn't mention it again. I knew she'd eventually dig around and figure it out. But for that brief moment, The imbalance was mine. Then came the mail. I opened a separate checking account under my name only, had my paychecks rerouted there, and started moving our joint auto-pay bills into my individual account. Nothing flashy. Just a slow bleed of control. She wouldn't notice right away. It'd take a few weeks before things bounced. That was the point. I wanted her to feel things slipping, not crashing. I wanted her to sit at a coffee shop with her charming little secret boyfriend, swipe her card, and feel that brief moment of confusion when it declined. That pause. That panic. That cold realization that she wasn't driving anymore. I also got to work documenting everything. It wasn't about being bitter. It was about being prepared. I printed out bank statements. I copied over security cam footage from our doorbell camera, her leaving in that red dress, her coming back at 1 in the morning. I even checked the car's GPS history from the night she kissed him outside that bar. All of it went into a folder labeled, Aaron, Final. I didn't know when I'd use it, but I would. I was making sure that if she tried to spin this later, I'd be holding the only version that mattered. The big moment came 2 weeks later when I invited her parents over for dinner. She was confused when I told her. Why? She asked, clearly annoyed. We haven't had them over in months. I thought it was time, I said calmly. We've got a lot to share. I made dinner, set the table, played it normal. She wore something casual, nothing special, probably because she still didn't think I had the guts to actually do anything. But when her parents sat down and started chatting, I waited until dessert. I brought out the pie, set it on the table, then walked over to the hutch and pulled out a thick envelope. What's that? She asked, already cautious. I slid it toward her mother. Something you should read. Aaron reached for it first, but I stopped her with a look. Her mom opened it, started flipping through the papers, and I watched her face shift from polite curiosity to silent horror. Her father leaned over, took one look at the second page, and let out a low breath. This is private, Aaron snapped, reaching to grab the envelope. No, I said flatly. This is what happens when you drag other people into your secrets. Her mother looked at her. Aaron, what the hell is this? I can explain. You already did, I interrupted. To him. The guy with the BMW. She looked at me like she couldn't decide if she was furious or scared. I told you we weren't done yet, I said. You thought I'd just sit here and take it. But I've been planning this dinner since the night you walked out in that red dress. Her father stood up. We're leaving. I can't be here for this. I nodded. I understand. Her mom shook her head as she stood. I didn't raise you to do this kind of thing. Erin didn't say a word. She just stared at me while her parents walked out, envelope in hand. I sat back down. That was just part one. She narrowed her eyes. You think humiliating me is going to fix this? No, I said. But it's going to help me sleep tonight. She didn't speak to me for 3 days after the dinner. Not a single word. She left early, came back late, barely made a sound as she moved around the house like some passive tenant just waiting for Elise to run out. I didn't mind the silence. It gave me time to think. Not just about what she did, but about what I actually wanted now that everything was exposed. I knew I couldn't live like this. The house didn't feel like a home anymore. Every corner of it reminded me of how long she'd been lying, how good she'd gotten at it. It wasn't just the cheating that ended us, it was the months of pretending nothing was wrong, while she planned something else behind my back. There's a kind of anger that burns hot at first, then turns into something slow and cold. That's where I was. Cold. Done. On the 4th night, she came home around 9. She didn't go straight upstairs like usual. Instead, she stood in the living room, keys still in hand, and looked at me where I was sitting on the couch. I didn't get up. I didn't even mute the TV. I just waited. We need to talk, she said. I nodded. We do. She sat on the edge of the armchair across from me, leaned forward with her elbows on her knees, and stared at the floor for a few seconds before speaking again. I've been staying late at work because I don't know how to be here anymore. Not with you. Not like this. That's your fault. I know that. I'm not asking you to make it easy. I just want to talk like adults before this gets uglier than it already is. I'm listening. She finally looked up. I don't want to be married anymore. I didn't flinch. I think that disappointed her a little. Good, I said. We're on the same page. She blinked, like she wasn't expecting it to go that smoothly. You don't want to fight? There's nothing left to fight for. She leaned back slowly, exhaled through her nose, and nodded. So, what do we do? I've already talked to a lawyer. I'll file. You'll be served. You'll have a chance to respond. We'll split everything according to the prenup, and if you make it messy, I'll make it public. She frowned. You had a prenup drawn up? No. You signed one when we got married. You were the one who insisted on it, remember? Back when you thought I was the one who'd end up cheating. She looked away. That was a long time ago. Still valid. She was quiet for a long time after that. I could see the wheels turning, like she was trying to figure out if she should push back or just accept it. Eventually, she stood up, paced a little, then turned back toward me. Do you still hate me? No. You sure? I don't have energy left to hate you. I used to. I used to think about you and feel this sharp burn in my chest. But now, I just feel nothing. You killed whatever was there. She sat down again. I didn't want to destroy everything. You did anyway. I never stopped loving you. Then your version of love is garbage. She didn't argue with that. Just looked down at her hands like she was waiting for me to say something that would give her an out, some tiny sign of forgiveness she could cling to. But I had none to give. I should move out, she said after a while. You should have done that the night I saw you kiss him. You're going to keep throwing that in my face forever? No. Just until I stop seeing it every time I close my eyes. She stood up again, walked toward the stairs, then stopped halfway. Will you ever talk to me again after this? If we need to. That's cold. You don't get to complain about cold. She nodded, turned, and walked up the stairs without saying anything else. I sat there, listening to the sound of drawers opening and closing, the closet sliding, the soft thud of something falling over, and then silence. She didn't come back down that night. I didn't go up. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. Her side of the closet was half empty. Some of her shoes were missing. The perfume bottle was still there, the one I used to compliment every time she wore it. I didn't touch it. I left it exactly where she left it, like a final, useless reminder of the woman who used to live in this house. 3 weeks later, the papers were signed. She didn't contest anything. No back and forth, no dragging it out. Just a flat acknowledgement of the terms and a simple signature like she was accepting an online agreement she didn't bother reading. The day I got the final confirmation email from my lawyer, I didn't feel anything. Not relief, not sadness, just a kind of tired emptiness. I didn't celebrate. I didn't tell anyone. I just sat on the back steps of the house and stared out at the patchy grass that I kept saying I'd replant but never did. The place felt different. It wasn't the silence. I'd gotten used to that. But something else. The feeling that something final had happened. That everything after this would be different in a way I hadn't fully processed yet. A few friends reached out. They'd heard through the grapevine that things were over. I got the usual sorry, man messages, the well-meaning check-ins, the you'll bounce back nonsense. I didn't respond to most of them. Not because I was bitter, but because there wasn't anything to say. What could I tell them? That I watched my wife slide out of our marriage one step at a time, like it was a jacket she no longer wanted to wear? That I let it happen without stopping her because I wanted to believe it wasn't real? No one wants to hear that. Everyone prefers a clean story. Someone cheats, someone gets mad, someone leaves, someone wins. But real endings don't work like that. Sometimes, there's no yelling. Just quiet doors closing and routines being rewritten one decision at a time. Erin didn't reach out. Not even once. No messages, no phone calls, no awkward attempts to check in. She disappeared from my life so cleanly that it made me wonder how long she'd been preparing for it. I saw her once, randomly, in the parking lot of the grocery store. She didn't see me. She was getting out of a car I didn't recognize. Maybe it was his. She looked different. Lighter. Like someone who no longer had to lie every day. I didn't walk over. I just watched her from inside my car for a few seconds, then drove off. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't my problem anymore. Her choices, her life, her direction, they had nothing to do with me now. I didn't have to wonder where she was or who she was with or why she was distant. All of that was behind a line I didn't need to cross again. I started making small changes around the house. I got rid of the guest room furniture she picked out, donated the dishes we never used, painted the hallway a different color just to make it feel less like her. I didn't go overboard. I wasn't trying to erase her. I just wanted the place to look like it belonged to someone else now. Someone who didn't live with half-truths and second-guessing. I even went out and bought a proper mattress for the bed. She always complained about the old one but never actually replaced it. I did. Not because it bothered me, but because I could. That was the shift, realizing that I didn't have to negotiate every small decision anymore. I could do what I wanted without checking someone else's mood or schedule or secrets. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. That part was loud and obvious. The hardest part was accepting that she stopped loving me long before she acted on it. That's the part no one warns you about. That people don't just wake up and cheat. They slowly stopped showing up, piece by piece, until one day they're still there physically but long gone in every other way. I spent so long thinking I could fix whatever was wrong if I just tried harder, spoke softer, gave her space, asked fewer questions. But nothing I did would have changed the outcome. She was already on her way out. I just hadn't noticed how far she'd gotten. A month after the papers were finalized, I finally opened the folder I'd made with all the evidence. Screenshots, GPS logs, receipts I'd collected just in case I needed to prove something. I went through each page, one by one, until I reached the end. Then I shredded the whole thing. It wasn't about forgiveness. I didn't feel that. But I didn't want to carry the proof of her lies around like some twisted trophy. She made her choices. I lived through them. That was enough. I didn't need reminders. The last thing I did was cancel the streaming service account we shared. It sounds small, but it was one of those lingering threats. Her profile was still on there, with the same stupid nickname she gave herself years ago. I stared at it for a while before deleting the whole thing and setting up a new one. Fresh watch history. New suggestions. No shared favorites or half-watched shows. I didn't need to restart everything, but I needed to feel like I was no longer watching the leftovers of a life that wasn't mine anymore. I didn't win. There was nothing to win, but I didn't lose either. I walked out of that marriage with my integrity, my name, and a quiet understanding of what I would never tolerate again. And sometimes, that's all you need to start over.